Making a movie with a psychopath is a little like poking a snake with a stick.
Get on with your bloody work. Tell me what to do.
When the head rears and the fangs start flashing, it shouldn't really be so surprising.
Get to work.
It's part of what I do.
Off. Get to work.
Meet Sam Vaknin. He's someone who's not afraid to talk about the demons inside his head.
I lack conscience. I have no empathy. I am verbally abusive. I have horrifying rage attacks, which I'm unable to control and so on, because I'm frustrated.
Or the deficiencies of others.
You're a hostile filmmaker. Hostile, ill-informed, intellectually lazy, ill-prepared, disorganized filmmaker. That's what you are.
In fact, he may just be about the most honest person I know.
It is not hard for me to admit that I'm a psychopath, or that I have psychopathic traits, or that I display psychopathic behaviors.
Or the best liar. So we've agreed to make a film to find out if it's true that maybe he was born without a conscience. I never intended to be dragged into the picture myself. I'd hoped the process might be educational. I thought it might even be fun. Boy, was I wrong about that.
Oh, believe me, I haven't started to mistreat you.
Sam Vaknin is an enigma, an ex-corporate criminal and certified egomaniac. These days, though, he says he's turned his life around by helping the kind of people he used to cheat and abuse. When Sam Vaknin looks in the mirror, he likes what he sees. I first came across Sam on the internet. He runs a busy website and lives off the proceeds of his self-published book. It's a perpetrator turned whistleblower perspective on what he calls malignant self-love. His biggest market are the many victims of extreme narcissists just like him. Sam tells me he's a psychopath, and while it's true all psychopaths are narcissists, not all narcissists are psychopaths. Confusing, huh? Because when it comes to the clean-shaven and well-spoken version of the psychopath, we've all got a lot to learn.
Psychopaths regularly do bad things to others, but feel fine and have no regrets. And in some ways, they just can't help it.
What they can do is they can mimic emotions, they can mimic a genuine interest in you, when in fact there's really no interest beyond the interest that a cat has in a mouse, right? Think of the poor mouse. The poor mouse is saying, why is the cat doing this? And the cat is saying, there's a mouse, and saying, and I'm a cat and it's a mouse and I do what cats do. That's the psychopath.
But not all psychopaths do physical cruelty. I'm interested in the concept of the psychopath in a suit, the kind that doesn't fit the Hollywood stereotype of the sadistic serial killer, or the kidnapper torturer from the nightly news. Sam's never physically violent. He wears nice clothes, he's clever, and can be a lot of fun. So how could he possibly qualify as a psychopath?
They look the same, they may even appear to act the same as we do, but in the long term, what they have in mind is their own self-interest. I've used the term social predator, and I think that's probably appropriate.
When it comes to the study of psychopaths, Professor Bob Hare is the recognised world leader. Hare spent more than 30 years of his work life inside Canada's high-security prisons. Nowadays, he thinks he should have spent more of that time over at the stock exchange, observing society's more successful psychopaths. Hare's convinced psychopaths are closer than we think. There are many more out in the world than behind bars. 1 in every 100, he says. They could be your boss, your workmate, your relative, your neighbour, or your lover.
They could often be quite charming. They can manipulate, they can con, deceive you. into thinking that there's something that they really are not. And it would take a long time before you actually realize that you're being used and abused.
And on issues like these, he and Sam mostly agree.
The vast majority of psychopaths, like an iceberg, are under the water. And like an iceberg, they are inert. They do nothing. They're just there. They torment their spouse by being unempathic, but they don't beat her or kill her. They bully co-workers, but they don't burn the office. You know, they are not dramatic. They are pernicious. Most psychopaths are subtle. They are more like poison than a knife. And they are more like slow-working poison than cyanide.
Sam was once a successful businessman in Israel, a multi-millionaire, he says, but now lives here in one of the poorest countries of Europe. Sam thinks he's a psychopath. I'm not sure.
I've always had this fascination with ruins, places where people have been and are no longer. It resonates with something inside me. Inside it's a wasteland, so I'm attracted to outside wastelands as well.
If he is a psychopath, he breaks a few of the basic rules. Self-awareness, for one.
My life is utter chaos. I change jobs on average every year and a half. I have divorced once. I have married twice. I lost all my money, and we're talking millions of dollars, 3 times. I have hit rock bottom so many times that finally it penetrated even my thick skull, that something was wrong with me.
A steady emotional life is another rarity amongst psychopaths. Sam is married. He's been with his wife Lydia for more than 10 years.
Yeah, my relationship with Lydia is based on, I believe, on mutual gratification of needs, her needs and my needs. So she is what I call narcissistic accumulator. She's living proof and living witness of my grandiosity.
For a convicted con man, Sam's brutal honesty is surprising, even strangely appealing. But the most truthful moments always seem to happen when it's just him, me, and the camera.
I like to present a facade of the self-effacing, modest person. I call it in my book false modesty. It works. It gives other people the impression that I'm underneath it all, I'm human.
You are human, aren't you?
I firmly believe that you want to believe that, yes. Firmly believe that.
Sam's about to create a world first. He's the only civilian we know of to put themselves through the rigorous psychological and neurological testing required for a proper diagnosis of psychopathy. And today, our diagnostic roadshow leaves from Skopje.
We have to take the DVD.
Can we take our book also, Malignant Self-Love?
Just a second, how many do you need?
6. 6 Malignant Self-Love.
You always miss 4.
6. I want to give each person a copy.
Over the next 3 weeks, Sam's personality will be evaluated and scored. Then his brain will be scanned by some of the leading psychopathy researchers in Europe.
Why make this movie? I think the movie touches on a very, very interesting topic. Is the brain really the seat of the mind? Can the two disciplines match, psychology and neuroscience? Why am I going on this trip? Well, it's interesting to meet the leaders of the field. Also, frankly, I'm very keen on observing narcissistic traits, narcissistic styles, narcissistic elements in these people. I will be observing them and testing them, no less than they will be observing and testing me.
To be honest, I'm still not really sure why I've chosen this mission. One thing I do know is that psychopaths don't play by other people's rules. So in some ways, I guess, I'm deliberately putting myself in the firing line. Before leaving, I wade through my camera tapes, hours of Sam talking about himself from our first meeting 2 years ago. And I'm reminded of Sam's special promise to me about what might happen if the movie doesn't go his way.
So can I expect that you will fuck me over at some point in the process of making this film?
I think this film is so aligned with my emotional interests, and not to mention commercial interests, that the likelihood is low. But only because of that, not because I like you, not because I would not hesitate to inflict on you grave professional and financial damage. If you forgot to put something in them, or if you left anything open-ended, or if you left anything to the goodwill of the narcissist or the psychopath, he will fuck you over, if only for the kick of it.
I believe Sam when he says this. But I've got my camera, a good team, some smarts, a lucky hat, and a home address a long way from Macedonia. It's a dangerous combination of naivety and arrogance, I know, but I reckon I can handle it. Doesn't mean I'm not worried about the potential long-term fallout.
I don't particularly enjoy doing the video diary thing. It's not really my thing. But I do want to remember what I'm feeling at any particular time during this adventure, because part of me is worried that that I'm in some way going to be changed for the worse by this encounter.
I wonder whether the brain of a psychopath is really that different to mine. Most of all, I'm just curious what it's like to be around one, up close and personal, to find out what happens when they drop their mask. And I've convinced myself I need to capture this on video. Like Sam, I've read all the books, but it seems to me the scientists can only tell us so much. We've landed in what's arguably still the central business hub of Europe. It's a great place to be studying the corporate psychopath. And we're off to meet a researcher who can tell us if Sam's personality profile matches up. Sam says that during his days as a high-flying businessman, he used to live not far from here.
It was a 5-story mansion. I leased it from an Israeli guy.
This is when you were rich.
This is when I was rich. And a far more malignant narcissist than I am now, which is difficult to imagine, I know, but still. I hired a butler. I stole the butler from Faye Dunaway. He was Prince Charles's butler.
It might well be true that Sam once had a posh English butler. But what I want to know is, does he really have what it takes to be a successful psychopath?
Evolutionary psychologists first coined the term successful psychopath to describe the advantage that a lack of conscience gives someone in outmanoeuvring others in the human food chain.
The argument is, if a psychopath milks other people of resources, whether it's money, property, whatever, they gain these resources, they become more attractive to other females, they attract females, they can reproduce more freely and easily. So the argument is, in a way, psychopaths are perfectly tuned machines, that the engine isn't broken at all. It's a Rolls-Royce of the evolutionary cheating strategy game, and that they play the game to the full.
Research by Australian-born organisational psychologist Belinda Board has backed up this idea. Board's 2005 study found a high degree of psychopathic traits amongst the UK's top-ranking business executives.
I think the reason, in all honesty, it got so much publicity was because there was a great caption for all the journos, which was, is your boss a psychopath?
Board compared personality disorder profiles amongst criminals, mental patients and business leaders. She found the CEOs were more histrionic than the other groups and just as narcissistic and compulsive. The bosses, it seems, just weren't as antisocial.
Personality disorders are not these discrete illnesses, if you will, inverted commas, discrete diseases, using that medical model where you either have it or you don't. Actually, these perhaps are just extensions of normal characteristics that each of us have, just in varying degrees.
If you're very bright, you know how to dress well, you have, say, the gift of gab, you're raised in an affluent family background, You don't go into the bank and rob it. You get in the bank, you become a director. I mean, if you're fairly attractive, that opens up all sorts of doors for you. If you're intelligent, even more doors. The combination of good looks, intelligence, and lack of conscience is deadly.
This trifecta could explain the twists and turns in Sam Vaknin's biography. Pretty much everything Sam tells us about his life story is stranger than fiction. But our research has confirmed at least these bits. He was a recognised child prodigy with an IQ of 185. At university by age 11. From migrant parents and modest beginnings, he was taken under the wing of one of Israel's richest businessmen. By 21, he was travelling the world in a private jet. Later, he struck out on his own as a dot-com entrepreneur. He was young, rich, and almost famous. Then, in 1995, he lost everything when he went to jail for a major securities fraud.
Wow.
Today, researcher Belinda Board has agreed to add Sam to her database.
Thank you. First, allow me to burden you with my, some circles consider to be a book. You know?
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Yes, please go ahead.
So what I'll do first is if I can just ask you some basic questions and say about who you are. May I ask your age?
47.
And your personal status? Would you say you're married and together?
My wife believes I am.
Married, separated, divorced?
Married.
Married and together.
Sam begins with a charm offensive,
Do you have any...
but secretly is unimpressed by the psychologist's tool of choice.
Circling the word true or false. It's 162.
Board uses one of the most popular clinical tests of its kind. It involves 162 true-false questions designed to hone in on the 11 most recognised personality disorders.
Narcissist. I like to know important people because it makes me feel important. One of the diagnostic criteria. True. I'm not subverting the test. I'm just for the sake of the film, I'm reading aloud some questions and explaining what they pertain to. Don't worry, I'm not altering the responses.
Things have gone pretty swimmingly till now, but a seemingly minor query about Sam's educational qualifications sparks a dispute which threatens to derail the day's proceedings.
Why can I ask you, what's the highest degree you've ever attained?
PhD.
A PhD. And where was that from?
At Pacific University.
Because I went on to your website to try and look at the connection and I couldn't make it connect.
Connect between what and whom?
You know, when it says click on here.
Oh, that's for brain badge, possibly.
No, on your
Because they've changed the
PhD
name.
and it just wouldn't link through.
Oh.
Was your dissertation published?
Yes, it's in the Library of Congress. If you go to the Library of Congress, you search for Sam Vaknin, you'll find my dissertation and the defense.
And what was the dissertation on?
Time asymmetry, the concept of time asymmetry.
Right.
So I did a PhD, I defended it in 1983, and a copy was deposited in the Library of Congress.
Sam's ruffled by Belinda's doubtfulness, but he waits till our cameraman's left the room to voice his displeasure, and I'm left reaching for the camcorder.
Yeah, shut it off. So it was a bit of a stupid exchange. Where's the university? Why you couldn't click on the link? What link? I'm sure there's no link whatsoever. I don't know what she's talking. Why couldn't click on the link? Where can I see your PhD? What gives you the right to ask to see my PhD? Where can I see your academic degree?
You have history.
You have my
Is
CV,
it
so-
a proof? You don't believe the point.
You believe her,
don't
you don't
believe
believe her.
Sam and you believe her. And what does it show? That you have like, okay, Sam is a psychopath, he must lie. It doesn't sound well.
Yes, psychopaths lie to obtain goals. They don't lie just to lie, they lie to obtain goals. If a psychopath sees a woman and he wants her money, he would lie to her that he loves her. If a psychopath wants to obtain a job, he would lie that he has a PhD in conjunction with the job. A psychopath would not lie generally just to lie. Psychopaths are very goal-oriented. They are like torpedoes or laser machines. You know? They're goal-oriented.
The status of Sam's alleged PhD becomes the thorn in the side of our relationship for the rest of our time together.
Tomorrow I'm going to ask Belinda to substantiate her academic credentials. Her word is not good enough for me. I want to see proof that she is what she says she is and who she says she is. On the same vein, I might ask you to substantiate your alleged credentials. I don't even know if you're Ian Walker. You claim to be Ian Walker. I haven't seen your ID, your passport. Why you're smiling? I haven't seen that you are so adept with what you're doing. Right. I want to see proof that you are who you say you are. Okay. I can prove my dissertations. Can you prove your credentials?
Nothing. No, I can't prove anything.
I thought so. I thought you can't.
Psychopaths are very good at lying and don't like being caught out. But they usually weave in just enough truth to keep their victims confused. Sam, though, says he prefers using honesty as a weapon.
In order to convey to you my displeasure, I informed you of what I think of your mental capabilities or lack thereof. And I am more than willing...
fucking idiot.
Yes, among other things. And I'm more than willing to do it again and again and again. Don't make any mistakes about it.
No, I believe that.
Right.
To be true.
To prove to you that this behavior is under full control is that when you switched on the camera, I immediately stopped.
The rules of engagement in Sam's game seem to change as we go. And I feel like my grip on the film is slipping.
The agreement is that you shoot the film and I talk. If you want me, give me the camera, you talk and I will shoot the film.
I can give you the camera. Do you want the camera?
If you want... No, don't be childish.
No, I'm not.
Don't be childish.
You said if you
want to
swap
talk.
roles.
You want to talk, I will hold it. If you want to talk, go ahead.
If you want to swap roles, we can do that too.
If you want to cross the lines and participate in the film, be my guest. You know.
At this moment, I'm reminded of some advice Sam offers on his website. Here's how to avoid the wrath of the narcissist is a list of 5 don'ts. Number 1 is never disagree or contradict the narcissist. Whoops.
Direct
one thing I am interested in your do's and don'ts of how to deal with a narcissist. Yeah.
Right.
How do you think I'm going? Because I don't think I'm doing that well on your do's and don'ts.
I don't think you're interested to do well. I think essentially you're a very spoiled person and quite narcissistic.
Yeah.
And I
think you're right.
However, we have roles. For instance, I've made a commitment to you to be available at all times and so on and so forth, and I believe that so far I've kept my word perfectly. I believe you're hostile, that's my working hypothesis, and I believe that I have sufficient evidence to substantiate it. But
maybe that's my way of dealing with bullying.
Oh, believe me, I haven't started to mistreat you. If I wanted to give you a hard time, believe me, you would have been in far worse mental shape than you are right now.
Shall I just quickly tell you what I did overnight?
Sure, your agenda,
And then I'll
The next day, Belinda and Sam meet again to go over the results of his personality test.
The questionnaire, and I think you said yesterday that you understand how it works. So
yeah, I've written about it extensively. Yeah.
It takes those items and factors them in to the 11 dimensions. And so then what I come out with is, if you like, a profile, a PD profile. Here's the
Sam scored highly on a range of personality disorders, or PDs, commonly associated with psychopathy.
At this point, what's important is just to see the pattern. So you can see that we're starting here with histrionic, and it's coming in at a raw score of 10. And then you pick up with narcissistic. And then there's a gradual coming down, and the lowest raw score was for the dependent personality disorder. Then it starts to come up again with compulsive, down a little with passive aggressive, then going up relatively quite high with paranoid, then you're going up relatively very high with schizotypal, down a little bit on the schizoid, and then peaking at avoidant. So
Sam's narcissism, though, doesn't show up as much as he might have expected.
Based on this information, because you said yesterday a couple of times, I'm a narcissist, and that's why I'm, according to this, actually not significantly different to any of these 4 populations.
Well, it's a fair assumption that these are, unusual populations. And narcissism seems to be prevalent, more prevalent in these populations than in the general population. That would be a fair and safe assumption. So that's why I don't stand out, maybe. You know.
Belinda has lined up Sam's scores against her other groupings of businessmen, psychiatric patients and criminals. And it's the shape of the graph tracking his profile that tells the real story.
The blue line is the psychiatric population, and for me there was a very close relationship in the trend of the shape.
The comparison shows Sam's profile more akin to those kept in a psychiatric ward than those ruling the boardroom. And Belinda suspects his evangelical narcissism could be some sort of curious con job.
If I strip everything else away and I just look at the narcissism, which is really what this is about, he seemed to almost wear it as a badge. And I wonder if we took that badge away, because he didn't score significantly higher, what would that mean to him? What would that mean to his sense of self? And what would that mean to his way of life?
The next morning, we're off to a town north of Manchester, where it'll be Lydia's turn to face the experts. She's going to meet with someone who's been trying to understand the women who fall in love with psychopaths. I wonder if she'll fit the pattern of a typical victim.
I want safe ground. I'm not safe. Now, in this moment, I'm not safe.
At 39, Lydia's keen to have a baby, but time's running out.
I do want to have a child, but I don't know. Look, I'm in a critical age. If I want really to have, then I have to have it now.
And according to Sam, Lydia's deeply unsure about his capacity to be a good father.
Lydia would be a fabulous mother. It's such a pity. And she doesn't know what to do. She's trapped. She wants a child. She can't have it with me. She realized that for many reasons. But she loves me in her way, probably dearly. She's also probably addicted to me and my way of life.
And Sam's way of life isn't easy. That night over dinner, my camcorder captures one of their almost daily flare-ups.
I want to understand.
Don't let me
I don't
get up from
understand.
here and fuck off from here.
Why are you getting angry? I'm
Because
asking a
you
relevant
don't listen what I'm talking about. You don't listen what you don't want to try even to understand what I'm talking about. You don't. It's not first time. It happened few times on this trip. I'm fed up. I'm beginning to be fed up. I'm telling you that.
What is wrong?
I'm going out.
What is wrong with reading a book?
But it wasn't always like this. When Lydia and Sam first met, it was a whirlwind courtship full of romance.
We met and he said, I know what I want. I love you. I said, I beg your pardon. It was like thunder from no clouds. It was, you know, very weird. I said, wow, this guy gets what he wants. That's it. In any possible relationship, never mind if it is with lover, with parents, with business relations. Doesn't matter. He gets what he wants. Actually, in effect, I needed some person like that. In our country, in Macedonia, we couldn't get married because
Yeah, we had to go to Cyprus to get married.
didn't want to give us some document that Macedonians needed.
We reached Cyprus at the very last moment, and the mayor of Nicosia himself was there, and he had a big kind of boom tape recorder, you know, which the blacks carry in the United States when they want to aggravate the whites. And he dropped the cassette into the tape, pushed it, and the opening notes, you know, ta-na-na-na. Okay, you agreed to take her? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you agree to take him? Yes, I did. Bye. Thank you. And
That was it.
the whole thing lasted, I think, 34 seconds.
There have been very few studies into how and why so many women fall for the charms and wiles of psychopaths. Many partners stick it out for years, ending up emotionally and financially ruined. But in the research that has been done, there's one lure that comes up again and again: It's the gift of flowers. Lots and lots of flowers.
Only in the initial stages does the psychopath do big gestures. He's attracting the female. But then, once she is in the net, closure comes. And he closes. It's like a business deal very, very quickly. You see, it's all about exploiting the empathy. You could say that it was quite an intricate mating strategy. On the other hand, you could say that it was to get one foot in the camp and went in there to live a parasitic lifestyle and to exploit all the resources of the woman. But because she has high empathy, people with high empathy, they're very good at sharing resources.
For an academic, Christine Kirkman watches a lot of television. Whenever she can tune in, her life goes on hold for the long-running TV soap Coronation Street. It's a guilty pleasure that gave her one of her best research ideas. The character Deirdre Barlow was one woman who kept on falling for the wrong guy. It culminated in a storyline that left her behind bars, doing time for the man she loved. Kirkman thought there might be lots of other Deirdres out there watching the show.
There were a lot of women who had been traumatised in this same way, who had been duped by a man who was living a double life. It has been commented on in the academic literature that the only way to really access the psychopath is to be able to contact and interview people who had real-life experiences of them.
Christine's chosen an intimate, out-of-the-way pub for her session with Lydia. The questionnaire she's asked Lydia to fill out about Sam has thrown up some interesting issues on both sides.
The second schedule was about the personality characteristics of, in this case, your husband, and this is what makes it unusual, because in actual fact, the women that we interviewed, none of them were with their partners. They had all separated from them. So maybe they were more bitter than what you are.
The P-scan devised by psychopathy pioneer Bob Hare is a rough screener for psychopathic traits. But Christine's twist is getting the women partners to fill out the forms in order to rate their problematic men.
I can't really be certain. I can't give you these answers as my final answers. So most of them are ones, for example.
But if I were to say that, for example, that he lies easily while looking you in the eye.
No, I can't say it as a sentence, he is a liar, because he isn't.
You say on here about the antisocial pursuit of power through being aggressive, or...
He is not physically aggressive.
But verbally he is.
But verbally he can be very aggressive. He prevails all the time. He doesn't listen to the other. He doesn't listen to me what I'm saying. There is no really conversation when he is in the mode of aggression or rage. In such situations, I get up and I go.
Does he make rules for you or punish you in any way if you don't stick to his rules?
I make rules to him.
I see.
I put rules. When I tell him, don't leave this towel here. Okay, he will not leave it then there, but the next time he will put it. So I make a rule. Now, rule 2515. Don't put your towel there.
She makes the rules and she sets the parameters. I would consider that saying to somebody, rule 2001, you do not put the towels in here, is, if not abusive, quite challenging.
Later in the day, Lydia fronts up for Christine Kirkman's verdict. Two strong results have come out of the morning session. One is that Lydia has plenty of potential to make a good victim.
In actual fact, your scorings on this particular schedule demonstrated that you were a person who had very high empathic tendency. It correlates with a lot of other things. High emotionality, kindness, cries easily at things that touch them. And in that region, you had a high score, and that was in line with the other ladies that we interviewed.
But Sam's psychopathy score, on Lydia's reckoning, is low.
In the interview, we looked at the schedule of abusive behaviours, things such as punishment, rules, humiliation, constant criticism, character assassination. Those abusive behaviours for yourself, the incidence of them was extremely low in comparison to the other ladies.
It is one of those things that is quite impossible to interpret, is how much denial a person has. Does she see herself as being a victim? This is what is important. And she does not see herself as being a victim because she claims that he is the best person that she's ever met.
We're at the halfway point in our diagnostic journey, and on our testing so far, Sam seems less narcissistic than he likes to think, and hardly a psychopath at all, at least according to Lydia. I've been up half the night, delving deeper into Sam's past. I've checked out the suspect credentials of the online university where Sam claims to have gained his degree. Maybe I am becoming the hostile filmmaker he says I am, but I don't know what else to do to combat the bullying and lying. When I leave the carriage for a moment, Sam tells Lydia he spent much of the trip spying on me from the seat behind.
In these papers, he described me as a fraud, a swindler, criminal that is victimizing people, lying about my dissertation, The papers that I saw there totally support my view that he's a hostile filmmaker.
By the time I return, they both seem convinced my only mission is that I'm out to destroy them.
If you reach the conclusion, or you came with the concept or with the conception, that here's this conman who is bilking money out of people, falsifying his credentials, doesn't know what he's talking about and stuff like that, then go. Go for it. And again, I'm not angry at you, believe me. You know that when I'm angry, you're the first to know. I'm not angry at you at all. I regret it. No, I'm not angry, believe me. Come on. When I'm angry, right, when I'm angry, you can't make a mistake. You know what is a profound feeling I have? I'm very sad because I think you squandered a unique opportunity. Unique. Not because I'm unique, but because definitely what I do is unique. I think you squandered it. And the result will be kind of pornographic film of, another Hannibal Lecter roaming the earth and cheating people. Statistically, according to the lowest figure acceptable, there are 8 million psychopaths in the United States. So what did you do? You made another movie about a psychopath? Who? It will be of interest to whom? Even not to me. I'm not sure I will ask you for copies.
It's been days since any mention of the dodgy diploma, and Sam and I seem to be getting on just fine. Sam's never happier than when we're back to doing the movie his way. I shoot, he talks.
It requires quite a bit of audacity for a Jew to say that Jesus was a narcissistic psychopath in front of Notre Dame de Paris. The 4 Gospels, canonical Gospels, to my mind, describe without a doubt someone who today would have been diagnosed as a narcissistic psychopath. Jesus. Jesus is the kind of guy that either you're with him or against him. On numerous occasions, Jesus refuses to cure people unless and until they tell him that they believe in him. Otherwise, he calls them dogs. It's as simple as that. He's very dramatic, which is typical of histrionic and schizotypal personality disorders. He goes to the temple, throws the tables. It's very expansive in his gestures and so on and so forth, and believes in things that even in his time, things which were considered outlandish, like, I'm the son of God. And
it actually worries me that things are going so smoothly. I kind of feel like I must be allowing him to control the proceedings. He can be a very charming man. He can be very funny, It's possibly the only real thing that makes me think that maybe so much of a psychopath.
But Sam's good mood doesn't last. Today's scheduled portrait session quickly goes pear-shaped. Without having provoked him in any way I know about, I'm again being treated like the enemy.
If you want to have a break, we're going to take us down.
Yeah, stop with the pleasantries. Get on with your bloody work. Tell me what to do. Stop with your pretensions, will you? Your Australian good manners. Get to work.
It's part of what I do.
Off. Get to work. Call me when you're ready.
I can't imagine what it'd be like to spend my life with someone like this. But most of the time, Sam and Lydia look very much like they're in love. Their relationship seems to defy the odds and most other people's expectations.
Thanks, Sam, for buying me this camera.
Thank Ian for taking you here.
Thank you, Ian, for taking me here. I thank everyone.
I don't remember anything, you know. I don't remember anything I see. I don't remember anything I read.
That's why I take photos for you.
Today we're on our way to visit a veteran psychoanalyst who specialises in coaching and counselling Europe's top business executives. Over the years, Manfred Ketz de Vries has tamed many a narcissist CEO. Maybe Sam could use some old-fashioned therapy.
It's not going to be that long, so we can even keep...
Sam is cranky on arrival, with me. But de Vries seems adept at diffusing the tension and gently puts his subject on the couch.
Have you been in Paris before?
Yes, I've lived in Paris. I used to live in Paris for a while.
As a psychoanalyst, I was curious about where people come from. An old supervisor always said, if you don't understand something, start at the beginning. And I was given this by Ian, and also looking at it, and also reading some of the things you're writing. You're much more complex than just narcissistic.
Well, this you should tell to the film director, because according to him, I'm a one-dimensional scam artist. Really? So, yes, you should share your view with him and perhaps you may reach together a modus operandi.
De Vries also wants to know about Sam's propensity for self-sabotage.
Why did you decide to focus on this particular thing?
Narcissism?
Yeah. And particularly in the way you do it, because you do it in a way that's probably before your time, actually, because you are probably at the moment one of the webmasters in this particular area. You can't avoid you. You're there. Very clearly, when I look at the things you've been doing, you have a lot of talents, but you also have the tendency to beat yourself up at times. No? Is that an unfair statement? Why are you beating yourself up?
Perhaps
there was a reason for it, but
perhaps because the discrepancy between my potential and what I am is yawning discrepancy, and I think I could have been more not in the sense that more famous or richer, but I think it could have been happier. For instance, I love to teach, and yet I have no opportunity to teach. So here's a waste of potential. I think I'm very, very good in extremely or rigidly well-defined roles. I am teacher, you are student. I think I can have excellent relationships, and I do have excellent relationships. Where it is far more fluid and flexible, there I think the fact that I have a personality disorder begins to be manifested.
You're proud of it. I have a personality. So great, I have a personality.
No, listen, first of all, I make money of it, so it's a kind of a living.
And some people have a cat, some people have a car, and you have a personality disorder.
Yeah.
It's like, I really have something there.
Yeah, finally have something. Finally have something. Yeah.
Sam doesn't seem likely to ever really be interested in counselling, but it's too good an opportunity for me. I asked for some free advice about how I might better deal with Sam.
And it's not easy with a narcissist because they're so self-centered. And they have so many defensive to push you away. And they're so scared that something might happen to them. And you have to be extremely patient because you're going to have lots of setbacks and bad surprises. That they do certain things that was not expected. And so basically, not be a parole officer. Meaning that you keep on accepting it. What I mean by that is that you don't condemn. They actually are trying to invite you to lash out. That's what they're trying to do. They basically are testing you all the time. See, can I trust this person? Is he going to lash out like what happened in the past? What did my mother do to me? There's the bad mother again. I knew it. He smiles at me, but there's the... So they're testing you all the time, and so you have to be a little bit faster than them, not fall into that trap.
Next stop on our scientific odyssey is Tübingen, an academic hotspot with a long list of luminaries, including medical pioneers, philosophers, and the man who developed the first mechanical computer. It seems fitting then that this medieval town is now at the cutting edge of where medicine and digital technology are being used to find out how the brains of psychopaths might be different.
Professor Dr. Bimbo.
Yeah, nice seeing you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, take away your stuff.
Lydia?
Yeah, Lydia. Pleasure meeting you.
Allow me to present you with my book.
Niels Birbaumer is someone Sam's been wanting to meet for some time. Most of the psychopaths who usually visit his lab arrive in handcuffs with armed guards. Today's test subject is a very different fish.
We forget the successful psychopaths because they are not studied. They don't come to the attention of the science, but also not to the attention of the social system because they are not criminal. They are not viciously violent, and that's why we don't know them. But their impact of society is tremendous. It was never studied.
Scientists suspect that psychopaths are different in the way they experience fear, especially anticipation of fear. And fear is the key to empathy.
In order to understand that what the consequences of your doing for others are, you have to feel them yourself. So the beginning of empathy is always selfishness. So first of all, you have to understand what pain, infliction of pain and anticipation of pain means to you, and then you do the second step and anticipate it, what it is for others.
But this doesn't happen for psychopaths. When their brains are tested for this reaction, the entire fear circuit is silent. The idea of consequences just doesn't compute. Some have used the term cold emotion to describe how psychopaths know things in their head but never feel things in their guts.
In the psychopaths, it's like a person who never had a body. It's like a person who is just the head in the old sense. It's a person with a head, and it knows everything in the head, but it lacks the memory of the bodily changes, and it lacks the memory of that disgusting bias of a negative emotion.
Even this is a bit too tight. A little more.
Sam will spend the afternoon inside a scanner to see if his brain has the kind of non-anxiety disorder the Tübingen team believe is one of the key symptoms of a psychopathy diagnosis. Using the latest scanning technology, the researchers will measure Sam's brain activity via blood flow. The theory is that when nerve cells activate, they suck up oxygen, causing a blood rush to different parts of their head. The high-powered magnetic signal generated by the scanner varies according to how much oxygen is in the blood. The computers then assign different colours to show the level of activity. The scanner takes more than 30 digital image slices every 2 seconds.
Psychopaths are not necessarily worse in experiencing fear. The problem is they cannot connect it to an event in the future, and that is the core of the problem.
Sam's left hand is hooked up to a pump which fires off a painful shot of pressurised air. His right hand provides skin conductance readings to measure if he sweats.
Okay, we will start with the acquisition trial number 1, where you will see faces, and on some faces you will get the pain stimulus.
The experiment flashes up 4 neutral faces, one of which corresponds to the painful jolt. Before too long, so-called normal, healthy subjects begin to flinch in anticipation of the pain. Sam's been on his best behaviour, but after the long session in the scanner, his head is spinning.
I'll tell you this is the only way to redeem psychopaths and to rehabilitate them. You put a psychopath through this once and he becomes Mother Teresa.
The result isn't quite as clear-cut as Sam might have liked. Sam thinks he's a psychopath, but his brain scans show he's not the textbook variety fearless type.
This is fusiform gyrus, shows that this is the faces. Clear face identification, no problem with it, strong response to faces, very good.
Even so, there are still major gaps in his fear circuit.
Which is different.
A silence in two critical sections of Sam's brain.
There's nothing in the orbitofrontal cortex, okay? And there's also nothing in the anterior cingulate. So there is something missing in the circuit.
What does it mean?
What does it mean? This will be a debate of about 20 scientists, everybody saying something different, okay?
The orbital frontal cortex and the anterior cingulate are both areas of the brain known to be connected to the emotional component of good decision-making. It's a bit like having a guardian angel that sits deep inside our head and tells us not to do bad things. In this case, according to the scan, Sam's angel has flown the coop. At the end of the day, the professor's mostly impressed by Sam's self-analysis and his potential to illuminate some of the more confusing conundrums of the non-violent psychopath.
His positions are knowledgeable, scholarly, highly sophisticated, much more sophisticated than what I find in science. What is missing is a theory and a concept of the causes, and of course a good theory and a good concept of the changes, how you want the changes. But that fits against psychopathy. First of all, you don't want to change. Second, you're not really interested why you are the way you are. But it's beautiful to describe that type of behavior. He's marvelously psychopathic in that sense.
The next day is the one we've all been waiting for, the official test to determine whether Sam really is a psychopath. I wonder what it'll mean for Lydia and her plans to make a family with him. For most people, a diagnosis like this would be a devastating and life-changing event, even for most psychopaths. But Sam seems to be revelling in the moment.
Can we start now?
There is, of course, a possibility that I'm not a psychopath, which would solve a lot of problems.
That would be tragic.
That would be devastating.
Guys.
That would be devastating. I'll have to kill someone too. That's the last scene.
Yes. Okay, now let's do the PCL quick, you know it.
The Psychopathy Checklist, or PCL, was developed back in the 80s by Professor Bob Hare and revised many times since. It's become the gold standard measurement tool used by police and mental health professionals the world over to determine who qualifies as a psychopath. Today, Birbaumer is using the most recent update of the shorter screening version of the PCL. So begins a cat and mouse game which lasts a couple of hours, as Sam is questioned in depth across a range of sensitive topics relating to different psychopathic traits.
For instance, I committed numerous offences. I was caught once.
Ah, you were only caught once.
I was caught once. You asked me criminal record, so this is a criminal record. But I vandalized property at least twice, that I remember.
Before you were 15 or after?
Before I was 15 years old.
This impulsiveness, we were talking before, yes. And your verbal aggression, aggressiveness. How often does that happen, like with your wife?
Very often.
Very often?
Very often. Daily, sometimes a few times.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I wouldn't have thought that. That's amazing. Your symptomatology, assuming that it is a symptomatology, is also something you make your money out now. You're living.
Oh, absolutely. I leverage my alleged mental illness into commercial success. So,
very good idea.
Yes, it is. I regard life as a giant supermarket, and
Take what it comes.
I stroll among the shelves and whatever comes to mind. It's totally itinerant, totally peripatetic, totally unplanned, totally impulsive, totally. That is psychopathic.
That is psychopathic,
Definitely.
yes.
The discussion about whether psychopaths are born bad or whether their environment creates their condition is still hotly contested. In some ways, the nature versus nurture debate is a chicken and egg argument. And there are those who believe psychopaths don't stand a chance.
I think psychopaths start off in life as damaged goods. They don't choose to be physically and sexually abused. They don't choose to have the negative genetic predisposition to a psychopathic personality. They, in a sense, are propelled by forces beyond their control into a psychopathic way of life. And in doing so, they also wreak havoc on everyone around them. And in turn, perhaps give rise to the next generation of psychopaths, insofar as we believe that abuse and neglect early on in life is one of the risk factors for a psychopathic personality. So there's almost a cycle of psychopathy.
But others are just as adamant that there's nothing to prove psychopaths are slaves to their genes or their environment. In fact, they choose to do exactly as they please.
It's not uncommon for somebody, particularly psychopathic individuals, to claim that in their early childhood, youth and so forth, that there were some traumatic events that happened, and this helped to either trigger off their psychopathic behavior or make them into what they are right now. But the literature is not really supportive of that. Psychopaths come from a variety of backgrounds, good, in between, bad backgrounds, wonderful families, terrible families. It doesn't seem to make a heck of a lot of difference.
Before the time comes to score Sam's psychopathy checklist, the Tübingen team take the opportunity to test another part of his brain in the scanner. It's an experiment which pits husband and wife against each other in a battle to see who best controls their emotions. They'll use a process known as a real-time neural feedback loop. It's a bit like creating a kind of brain gymnasium, where the participants do mental bench presses.
So we give the subject a trial and error chance, ask them to watch their brain, and try to manipulate it in a trial and error fashion. And the computer is just waiting for the right response. And the moment the right response appears, it says, great, now, again.
Lydia is used as the healthy control subject. She's asked to turn her emotions on and off by recalling both happy and sad events from her life.
So it will stay in the middle when you are just relaxed during the blue phase, but during the red phase you see that the thermometer is going up and down. And your task is to make it go up.
Via this simple thermometer graphic, Lydia is shown live visual feedback of her brain activity. After a short time, it seems like she can influence the meter up and down.
During this period we extract signals from a part of the brain called the insula, which is very important for emotional regulation.
Lydia's result, after only one session, shows her insula lighting up.
Lydia, we will have you out shortly. You finished your session. Now is my turn.
Sam's stint in the brain gym starts off badly, so he's given more than one chance.
It does not seem to make a lot of difference. The signal inside the insula itself is fairly flat, and it's not going up and down all that much.
Seems Sam has almost no ability to regulate his emotions, nor the capacity to learn how. Emotionally, he's flatlining.
So, what you see here, it's an orthographic view of the brain. This is Lydia's one single session data.
I have an emotional wife. On average, we have normal emotions.
Oh, yes.
So you can see here that there was a regular attempt to go up and down.
Which she did, more or less.
She did it more or less. She would definitely improve, I guess, with more training.
Yeah, more training.
So then let's compare this to...
Look at this. Look at you.
Okay, here is your data from the same region. and you see that it's almost hugging the zero. In fact, it is going down. There is no marked difference between the green and the blue blocks.
Do you understand now how come when I tell him I love you, he doesn't feel anything? It's just empty words, so I don't tell him anymore. Something like that.
No, it's not true. I don't feel. It's not true. I don't feel anything. I feel reassured. I feel reassured.
Lydia can joke about it, but I can't help wondering how she feels deep down about such a one-sided love. It seems cruel, but I want to get Lydia's reaction to some of the brutal things Sam has said about her so far during our trip.
Given an extent and in a certain sense, she does not exist. She is a reflection or sort of a tabula rasa, blank slate, where anything could be written and anything would be equally correct, equally right. It's a great pity.
Isn't this partly why you chose her?
Well, possibly, yes. Possibly. Psychopaths and narcissists choose easily malleable people. Not only spouses, but easily malleable people as, for various interactions. If you make a list of her needs and her preferences and her priorities, virtually none of them is getting fulfilled. She wants a child, she has no child. She's a healthy, sexual woman, she has no sex. She wants love, she gets a pale imitation of love, in her terms. Although I love her deeply and dearly as far as I can love at all. But as far as I can love is not even the beginning of what constitutes love among normal people. Yes, I pity her. I have mercy on her. But if I were to tell her tomorrow...
She uses that word for you too. She feels sorry for you.
I know. It's a pity-based relationship, and it's the worst possible foundation of any relationship. Relationships that are based on pity are pathologized by definition.
What do you think?
It's not normal love, but he loves strongly. I wouldn't say that he doesn't love me, because I see what he's doing and how he shares, and he is very intimate with me.
I did not believe in love. I was a teenager, I believed something will happen, the prince on the white horse. But in real life, it doesn't really happen. You know, no princess on white horses came to my door. So I gave up love. I found Sam.
At this point, I'm starting to question my own behaviour, especially towards Lydia. It's starting to keep me up at night.
The guilty get no sleep, they say. We all have agendas, whether we like to admit it or not. All filmmakers are narcissists. Maybe all documentary makers are also junior psychopaths trying to make people do things they normally wouldn't do or face things that they may not normally want to talk about, all for a result of what you see at the other end of the camera.
After all the high-tech brain scans, the critical final section at Tübingen is back to pen and paper. It's time to find out Sam's score on his official psychopathy rating. Niels Birbaumer decides to take Sam into his confidence and score the test with him. It's a highly unusual moment in a very strange couple of days.
2, 4, 6, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. That's the American cutoff score.
Yes.
The European one is 13. 13, right?
13, yes. Europeans are...
So for European standards, you're a real psychopath. But in America, you're okay.
But the truth of Sam's score is no laughing matter. It's 18 out of 24, the exact cut-off point for a fully fledged psychopath.
I expected to fail the test. I believed that I would have a score of 10 to 12. Because I believe that I'm more of a narcissist than a psychopath, far more. I think my psychopathic traits are ancillary, they're not very important. And a score of 18 was a bit of a shock to me, a bit of a shock.
The vast majority of people would receive a score of 0 or 1. A score of 18 would be obtained by perhaps 1 or slightly less than 1%. So 18, compared with the general population, is enormously high. And in fact, if you went into a prison and looked at the distribution of screening version scores, it would probably be around 12 or 13, not 18. 18 is very, very high.
For me, the implications of Sam's positive diagnosis haven't really had time to sink in. Like a lot of people who enter the web of a psychopath, maybe I've badly underestimated my own potential as a victim. I've failed to get any video evidence so far, but the story you haven't seen is that Sam's been bullying and verbally abusing me on an irregular and seemingly irrational basis from day one. He's been a genius at doing it only when our main camera is safely packed away. At times, I'm left wondering whether Sam's chosen me to make this movie rather than the other way around.
Scientists have long been interested in how it is that psychopaths seem to be able to successfully target the vulnerable person in the crowd. Recently, a Canadian psychopathy researcher devised a simple experiment to test how good psychopaths are at spotting a victim. Her curiosity came from a throwaway line from a famous serial killer.
I got this idea originally from a quote from Ted Bundy, who often is cited as being a psychopath. He said he could tell a victim by the tilt of her head as she walked. And that really struck me. I wondered, is that even possible?
Not surprisingly, it turns out that Ted Bundy was right. Angela Book chose a random sample of walkers, but included one person who had been the victim of a violent crime, a rape or serious mugging. It took the psychopaths only seconds to work out who was the odd one out.
In watching these 15-second clips, we asked people to decide whether or not this person would be victimizable in a mugging type scenario. So for people who scored higher on psychopathic traits that relate to manipulation and lack of empathy, they were more accurate in predicting who was a victim and who was not, just from watching the 15-second videos. So what you can see here is that her arms are not moving in synchrony with her legs, in fact. One side was, but the other side, in fact, was not. So that would be something that you wouldn't want to be doing if you didn't want to be seen as a victim. Anything out of the norm or that's not synchronous would be more likely to indicate vulnerability. And it is spooky, and I think what's going on is that they are social predators, and they're able to pick up on these cues because they've had practice. They seem to use it to their own advantage. So they would use it for victim selection.
The victims of Sam Vaknin are mostly untraceable or unwilling to speak on film. There's one in particular I'd love to track down, but our research draws a blank. He was a teenage friend. Sam claims he turned into a robot.
When I was 12 or 13, I hit upon the idea of psychological engineering, a kind of distorted, malevolent, malignant form of therapy.
Sam's test subject was the son of Holocaust survivors.
One of the major routes or paths into his soul, in order to destabilize him, was by using his parents' experiences as Holocaust victims. I exposed him, for instance, to a barrage of swastikas. I used to paint swastikas on his notebook. I conditioned him to regard Hitler as more and more human. One day I planted a stash of Holocaust victim pictures. These are very famous photos of naked men going to the crematorium.
After several weeks of pushing his buttons, Sam achieved the desired result, a fully programmable human.
I could program him by remote control any minute I wanted. He became a perfect machine. So I defined 10 or 20 stimuli, and I allowed him identical number of reactions with the monovalent mapping. Stimulus 7 should yield only reaction 23.
But it was all too much for his teenage friend.
He became psychotic and he was hospitalized in a mental institution. I think for 3 months or 6 months or something. He lost a whole year.
And later, when I finally get to ask Sam how he felt about what he'd done, I'm certain something is missing in his brain. Or maybe in his soul.
Do you think that what you did was wrong?
Well, yes, I think that what I did was wrong, simply because wrong is well defined in the Oxford English Dictionary. So I can't give you a counterfactual answer. As a matter of fact, it was wrong. Do I feel that it was wrong? In other words, do I feel guilt or remorse or anything? No, none whatsoever.
Again and again, I'm left wondering if Sam's story can really be true. But our research says it probably is. Makes me wonder if there's a test we can do for evil. It's the last scheduled stop on our adventure. Today we've organised a special visit to a unique collection of psychopathic brains. It's called the Vought Archive, hidden away in the basement of a local university. Over 1,000 criminal brains, sliced, diced, and sandwiched between glass. Sam would have loved this. It's the work of an enterprising scientific couple, Cecily and Oscar Vought, pioneers in humankind's search for the moral brain. The Vaught's went out of their way to access the brains of heinous criminals and the so-called morally insane.
An incredible term, by the way, that people could be insane because they have no conscience. You see that not only pseudoscientists or maths professors were doing that kind of work, but also very renowned neurologists as Vogt, as Flechtig, had their ideas about where could morality be localized in the brain.
Who knows, but in the future, these digital brain scans of Sam could be of similar interest to scientists. Current thinking still has it that treating psychopaths makes them worse, and punishment has no effect. Researchers, though, are beginning to understand the overlap between the moral parts of the brain and the parts which might indicate psychopathy. And this could be the key to unlocking the puzzle of how to deal with them.
First of all, we hope to find what you can call a neurotest for measuring morality. So it could be very interesting to know about a growing child who has some behavior problems, some conduct disorder, to know what his level of morality is. Our hope is that by knowing more about their brains, we found something that could be stimulating enough for the scientific community to help these people.
I was keen to hear what Sam thought about all this. But the day had started badly. I'd grown weary of Sam's off-camera tirades against me. They were now getting more frequent and more vicious. This time, I was determined his behaviour wouldn't go unrecorded.
Would you prefer not to come today, Sam?
Sheet face.
Sorry?
Sheet face. Pick your nose and lick your fingertips. Do something you're good at. You got that?
I don't really want to work.
Don't work.
Hey?
Don't work?
I don't want to work like this. I don't
want to work like this. That's the only way. What can you do? That's what I think about you. You're a fucking idiot, shit face, everything. Now, taking all this into consideration, what do you want to do? You are on a catch-22. What to do here? Slide. Breach the contract, and I'll be delighted. I buy my own tickets, baby.
No, Sam, I'm not interested in fighting with you about money. Money.
I'm not interested in your shit face.
I'm really not interested.
You're the most narcissistic person I've seen. You're the voice of a croaking frog and you fancy yourself a singer. You're an idiot. So here we are. Do you want to go or not? Well, pick your nose. You forgot to pick your nose. And don't forget to lick your fingertips. Revolting thing.
I know you're trying to punish me, but I'm not really sure
Yeah,
why.
I'm trying to punish you. You're so inconsequential. I'm trying to manipulate you into doing the movie that I want you to do.
Well,
okay.
Good luck. If you want to take this cab, I'm happy to give you the day off. And well, I guess I could get you to promise that you'll stop abusing me. Because I do not like being bullied.
Well, we all don't like certain things in life. But life is life, you know. Certain things are unchangeable.
I don't like conflict, Sam, but, you know,
well,
it seems like...
You seem to be courting it left, right, centre.
Victims of psychopaths are generally left confused and broken after their encounter.
Most of the psychopaths will actually have the victims ending up by thinking that they're the problem. And one can bully, manipulate, and con them. And rather than responding by either leaving or fighting back, they often will take it and think that he's right. You know, everything he says is right. There's something wrong with me, and I deserve all of this. And it's pretty sad.
Something called projection is common. It's a little like the tactics of a religious cult leader.
Characteristic of the paranoid is projecting, which means attributing to others one's own nefarious, malicious motives. And that's what you do. You're the one who's hostile. You're the one who did something dishonest. You are not careful with your clothes, etc., etc., etc. It is a perfect representation of what occurs in many religious groups, in which the leaders, in a sense, understanding of your deficiencies, absolves you of your sins, so to speak. And that's part of his strategy.
The victims all have something in common, and that is that they're human. And everybody can be victimized. I have been victimized. I have been conned and manipulated by psychopaths, and I should know better, but how do you know?
I love you.
If we believe in the fundamental goodness of man, we're doomed.
Maybe I'm a slow learner, but even after all this time with Sam, I'm still astounded by his capacity for cold-hearted cruelty. Only minutes after his onslaught against me in the hotel lobby, he can calmly slip into the third person and dissect the whole incident, giving us some useful tips on bullying at the same time.
Your body was flooded instantly with adrenaline and its derivatives, like norepinephrine and so on. Now, when these hormones pervade the bloodstream, your brain reacts. It shuts down certain centers and activates others. This is called a stress reaction, or stress syndrome, actually. Then when the abuse recedes, the adrenaline levels begin to drop. As they drop, the entire system goes into mayhem. The heart, that receives an adrenaline shock and pounded about 30 to 50% faster, has to readjust. Blood pressure drops precipitously, and you move from hypertension to hypotension. Many systems in the body go haywire within a session of bullying, and especially after the session is over. So what bullies usually do, they start and stop, start and stop. That achieves the maximum physiological arousal and the maximal stress syndrome. And this is the great secret of bullying. Never overdo it. Small doses. The victim will do the rest. Although you are shaking much less, I must do something about it.
As for me, I'm feeling quite shattered. Even though I've captured what I think is the real Sam on camera, I'm not sure I can properly explain the effect he's had on me. Happily, I give Sam the day off. It's a hasty and cheerless farewell. Early the next morning, Sam and Lydia will leave to return to Skopje. The way I feel right now, I'll be happy never to see them again.
Bye-bye.
At night, I hang up my hat and shave my beard, a kind of cleansing ritual. I'm thankful at last for some time free of torment. As for the issues Sam and I fought about almost daily during the trip, I'm still baffled as to why it became such a big deal. Back at home, I keep digging through my dozens of interview tapes, trying to find proof of what I remember as Sam actually bragging about his ill-gotten degree.
The PhD was acquired in a diploma mill. Diploma mill in the United States means a place where you buy your degrees. So it's a diploma mill. I'm not a real PhD.
You're also a doctor, though.
Technically, I am a PhD. I worked 2 years. I presented a thesis. The thesis was reviewed by peers. It is in the Library of Congress, you can see. But between you and me, that's not the rigorous PhD that people are led to believe when you use the title.
But finally getting to the bottom of the big fib of Dr. Sam is a hollow victory. For months afterwards, parts of his taunts still come flooding back to haunt me.
If you're a bit smarter than I give you credit for, you will lay in bed and you will think, okay, Sam told me many bad things. He did it malevolently. But now let's try, the weight out of the chaff. Let's try to see what of what he said is meaningful. What could be helpful? Which of the things he said are true for me and describe me accurately? And what can I do to change them?
Making a movie with a psychopath is one thing. Taking advice from them about how you should live your life is a whole other kind of madness. And that's one place I've promised myself I'm definitely not going to go.